Hello, hello everyone. Ted Simpson here on a wonderful Friday morning. I'm going to be creating, let's see, right on up here. Look at this, we're using a bigger canvas today, a 16 by 20. And what I like to do, of course, is show you how we put that liquid white on. Whoop, that was a lot. So, take my big old 2-inch brush here. Already spilled some. I don't think it's a painting unless you make a mess. At least for me. So, a small amount, just a couple of tablespoons is probably enough here. If you're painting along with me here, I'll show you my palette in just a second. We're going to be using titanium white, a little bit of Prussian blue, scratch that, phthalo blue, mountain mixture, dark sienna, sap green, cadmium yellow, and some bright red. But if you want to do Prussian blue instead of phthalo blue, phthalo green instead of sap green, it all works out. So I am just about done here, spreading a small amount of this out, back and forth. If you see the light reflecting off the canvas, you're able to easy to see the dry spots. So grind those in when you see them, like that. Blend the rest of the canvas out, and I think, we've got our product showcase setting on the camera figured out. A few different spots on the canvas. And you can see here, there we go. That's what we're looking for, is just a thin fingerprint on the canvas. Come on, go back to, there it is. So if you just see a thin film on your finger, you've got the right amount on the canvas. Look at that. It worked. I'll get this sucker figured out in no time. Only 100 videos. Alright, so, we do have a little bit of yellow ochre on the palette as well. So titanium white, phthalo blue, mountain mix, sap green, dark sienna, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, bright red. So, let's make a pretty little sky here. I think cover most of it up. Now, in my classes here, I have the paint kind of flattened down a little bit. Makes it easier to tap and move back and forth. Getting a little bit of paint up onto the brush. Hit those corners, come across the top, and let's just bring it down. Look at this. This brush is big. Don't even think about it. Just drop it in. And I'm going to go down, let's just say a little past halfway. Something like that. A little bit of the phthalo blue. I gotta remember, I'm tilted today. And I'm going to take just a tiny bit of that mountain mixture. And even a tinier bit of the sap green. Really working it back and forth, making sure it's evenly distributed in the brush. Ooh, look at that. Just a little bit of darker, slightly greener. And then it picks up that liquid white and gets lighter as we go up to the top. I'm going to pull some from the bottom, work it up. Pull from the bottom, work it up. There we go. Now, if you're not happy with it and you want to drop some more in, whatever you like, but try to keep those strokes nice and horizontal. And whatever's left after that, we don't care. All this, most of this is getting covered up, so I'll take a moment here and clean out my brush. I'm going to use the same brush here to do the blending as the paint application. So Devil beat time. Take the excess off into a paper towel, maybe a little bit extra. I call that the Bob tribute there, right on the easel. And then we've got our clean, dry brush. I make double sure. And now I'm going to go over it again. Crisscross, crisscross. The more you go over it, the more the color picks up that liquid white. Kind of turns into one solid color. I try to stick with blending out the middle, working my way up. That helps keep it a little bit lighter in the middle, darker at the top. Then we take a look. Do we like it? Do we like it? You know what? I think, just for the sake of showing you guys here, I'm going to scrape that green away. Don't want to accidentally get it in there. And if you're not happy with it, you should probably do this right when you're doing the sky. But sometimes you don't realize it until after the blending that your sky maybe needs to be a little bolder. And if it needs to be a little bolder, there's nothing stopping you from dropping in a little bit more of that blue into the brush. Start up in the top. And work your way down. Look at that. I think that looks a little nicer. Since we're going to be having some big old clouds in here, the clouds show up better on a slightly bolder sky, you know? But you'll notice here I pick some up from the top and I work it down, leaving it a little darker in the corners. I like that a lot better. Dry out my brush, just a couple little swirls here and there. Any final blends? I think we're good. All right, what are we going to do now? I'm going to clean that brush one more time, so I might be using that brush again pretty soon. Good enough. We're going to have some big old clouds here today. And what I do here is once my brushes get a little bit worn, they get a little bit worn down here, all these 1-inch brushes I have for my classes, you know, they're pretty darn used, but they still have a purpose. We take those old brushes and we can use those for a lot of the rough work, you know, bashing in a lot of stuff here, spreading the liquid white. Lots of uses to have a couple of spare brushes hanging out here. So I'm going to use one of these nasty old brushes here to make some nice natural fluffy clouds. Lots of paint up here in the brush. See what I'm doing there? Tapping, working it, plenty of color, mostly with the top half of the brush. That's where we want the paint. So let's create, oh man, I didn't test the brush first. Oh my god, it was like stiff as a board. Let's try that again. Look at that. I don't know, the paint dried in it or something. But this brush has a little bit of give to it. Let's try that again. Alright, it's raw and unfiltered here today. You see that? It's just like stabbing with a wrench or something. We gotta have the bristles bending to create this effect here. Now the main focus here is to get a nice outside top, you know, the nice outside edge of the cloud. That's the main focus. Once you get that nice chunky paint up there, try to leave it be. There's reasons for this. So maybe we're going to have another cloud over here. It's lots of paint. Lots of paint. It's going to be kind of lumpy and textured here. Lots of color. Let's just go with that. Now, what I've found here that works pretty well, when you tap this on, you don't like that kind of sparkly texture there. Just clean most of the paint off your brush and lightly tap it. Don't go above the cloud if you can help it. Just lightly tap. Take some of that texture away. There we go. I'm going to come back here with my big old 2-inch brush, and that's where I'm going to do the soft blending. And you know how Bob does it. Little circles here, just blending out the bottom of the cloud, softening it into the sky. Lightly fluff. That nice hypnotizing stroke, just ever so gentle. And then any little flyaways you can finish off just by barely touching. Okay? And we're going to do that as many times as we want to see clouds here. So I'm going to bring down some more white. Tap into plenty of color. Look how we can create layers here. Plenty of color. Making one cloud at a time. You don't want to keep going and making a ton of clouds on one side because it makes it tougher to blend. I'm giving it that light tap this time just with the 2-inch brush. Fluff. And maybe we've got a cloud in front. I'm just going to drop in another little thing here. The idea is we overlap to create that depth and distance. Very light little taps, soften that texture. Then I blend down the bottom. Fluff it up, a couple of strokes back and forth, and we're done. We're going to move on. Maybe we have some over here on this other side. I'd like to make an interesting outside edge there. We can add to it. Little tappers, then we come back and do our blend. Sky full of clouds here today. All right. Let's take a look at our mountain. We're going to be doing a big old mountain again. I do love making mountains. I've got a lot of classes coming up where we're doing mountains, so this is my time to practice. A little bit of that mountain mixture, which is basically Prussian blue, black, brown, crimson, all mixed together in a tube. That way you don't have to put out 5 colors just to make it. Cut off our little roll of paint. And we'll continue onwards. We're going to have our mountain a little bit offset here today, offset to the right. What the heck? Somewhere, oh, something like that. I know my mountains are looking similar lately. I just like this kind of interesting top where it's not just a peak, but there's a couple of different peaks going on here. Maybe a little lump right there. Pushing that paint in, scraping away the excess. Wiping it out on a paper towel. One little section at a time. You can kind of pull it out like that if you want. There we go. And this one here, we got a kind of like a sheer thing going on. Maybe a little peak comes down like that. Kind of turns and makes another one right here. And then it starts to trail off this way. See that? Push some color on, then scrape it away. All right. Double check myself one last time. Helps to have a clean knife. All right. Now, this is the day for dirty old brushes. And what I'm going to do, let's move some of that color. Just like the sky, we want it the boldest color at the top and let it fade downwards. So just moving that color a little bit to the right, a little bit of it to the left, whichever way you think your mountain is going. Find the angle, pull away, and keep working it down. This reminds me of that mountain that Bob did with the seascape. The mountain kind of has a little bit of a lean-to there. And these are just guidelines for you. If you kind of get a nice little shape going here, kind of see the highlights and the shadows, it's a good guide for you for when we're putting all the snow on. Okay. Clean some of that off. I've got my mostly dry 2-inch brush here. Let's just soften that base just a little bit. Look at that. It already got some nice mist happening down here. Okay. I've got my large knife. I do have a small knife here in case we need to get into some tight spots. So let us give this a try. I've got some of this tinted color here. Got a little bit of residue. We'll use that for our shadow. But some of this titanium white we pull down nice and flat. And then I cut off a little roll. Okay? Depending on the size and shape of your mountain, you may need a little bit more, a little bit less. Some people have better luck using more paint. Some people have better luck using less paint. We just want to let that paint just sort of bump and skip, creating all these little breaks and holes. The important thing is try not to mess with the same spot and going over and over it. I might need more weight on my palette. Another way to load it is pull across like that. That's a pretty big roll. You want to make sure that your angle is up a little bit higher here so it doesn't all come off at once. Okay. Then maybe a little peak, a little bit of snow right there, a little bit right there. Maybe a little bit right there. Just give us an idea of what's happening on our mountain. Before we go too far, let's make up some shadow here. White, some phthalo blue, pulled out, not mixed too much. If it's a little too mixed, add some other colors here so it remains a little marbled. There we go. take our knife here, and this time we're pulling down and out to the left. I think before I go too far, I'm going to kind of go back and forth. In my last video, I talked about how sometimes Bob would immediately go from highlights to shadows and back again. Let's try a little bit of that. Adding some highlight and then immediately going back and adding its own shadow here. So we can get more of a overlapping effect. There we go. So up here in this little section, we've got our shadow kind of coming down a little bit, a little more vertical, all these little sheer faces to our mountain. So using the short edge of your knife, just lightly pull a little more vertical rather than pulling to the left here. Creates a different breed of mountain. And then when I come back with my highlight color, I can put some of that highlight right on over it. And highlight and shadow each individual section here. A little bit of shadow right there, a little bit here. Pulling down and then coming over and just overlapping yourself. See, I did tell you I was going to run out of white, so get a little more up there. Oy. Ugh. There we go. Look at this jaggedy thing going on here. Still want to sneak just a little bit more right there. And all these other spots here, just adding some shadow. Wherever you see a gap and you see a lot of the background color, you can drop in some shadow. I see a spot or two here. Maybe I could have hit that a little bit. There we go. And then a little bit of shadow in there. Good. Nice little effect going on there. Now Bob had this little thing going kind of like this, a little bit of some highlights, creating a different shape right there with the shadow snow coming down to meet it, creating some shadows and highlights, working together to make this scene. So just play around with it. Figure out where the light is, where the dark is. Let these work together. Maybe a little bit more. I would just suggest you wipe your knife clean every time so you don't get a different color on there than what you were hoping for. Something like that. That's pretty nice. Got a nice thing going there. Clean up this edge just a little bit. There we go. Remember, if you're going to add to it, we're trying to stick paint on top of other paint. If you give it too much pressure, they're going to start mixing together. We don't want that. Kind of lose the effect. I can see here, need a little bit more deep. Just got to get a little bit of snow right up there. There we go. We got something working now. Nice. I hope that's working out for you. You can see that. Get a little bit of tips and tricks there. Just to throw a little bit more on down here, just so I have something to turn into mist. All right, turn my paper towel inside out, really wipe that knife clean. And let's take a moment here, really clean out my 2-inch brush. Good. Now, very lightly, tap, 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 sweep, sweep, sweep. Following the basic angles of our mountain. And I always tell my students here, you got to remind them just the bottom inch or two of your mountain. Once you start tapping up here, you're gonna really dissolve your mountain away into nothing. So if you'd want it to look completely shrouded in fog, yeah, you go ahead and tap up as much as you want, but if you just do the bottom inch or two, it's probably enough. And you can grow your mountain just by tapping and working away. See that? You can create some additional shadows and little things happening here. If we wanted to, we could get a little bit of green and create trees going up there just way off in the distance. But today, we're just going to focus on some nice mist. And at the very bottom, give it a couple quick crisscrosses. Look at how that mountain is just floating out there. Okay, well. I think it's time to jump right into the foreground and create all sorts of cool stuff. So, before we do that, let me do a little bit of cleanup here. We don't need any more of this shadow color. Drop that off. I'm going to take this white. We'll use a little bit of it, but I just want to get it up out of the way, just in case. And with that last little bit of the paper towel there, give it a quick little buff. Now we don't have to worry about putting white in stuff that we don't want white. So I'm going to take that mountain mixture, all of it. I'm going to add a nice little lump of green to it, maybe even a touch of that dark sienna. And I'm just going to mix those colors together briefly. Scrape it up, turn it over, spread it out. You don't have to go over this 100 times. Just want to change the flavor here to give it a little green tint. And the dark sienna will dull it just a little bit too. Just plenty of dark color with a little hint o' green. Hint o' green. Okay, so I am going to take my small fan brush here Get some color up in the brush here. And we need to see some little tree toppers. So I'm holding my brush well above center and tapping, just letting those bristles bend down a little bit. See that? All I care about is these little toppers. Turn my brush over, get a couple more, and you may need to reload several times here to do this. But I don't want to drag everything too far down. I'm keeping it relatively tight. Keep that brush moving along, connecting these, connecting them. We don't want there to be, like fence posts, lots of gaps in between each tree. Now, as I start moving my way away, I'm making them a little taller. See that? Now, sometimes, if you're having a little struggle with it, sometimes it's easier just to make a tall one and then bring the rest down to match. You can see how they're just starting to get taller and taller. Depends on how you want to plan this out. You can play around and just let this get progressively taller and fill in the rest of the trees, just so there's a little bit of randomness to all your treetops. It's up to you how your land is going to flow, how many of the small ones you want here. Maybe these can get even smaller. I don't know. I'm going to try. If it doesn't work, well, we can always make them bigger. Just these little taps. Once in a while I'm pulling down, like sliding the brush a little bit. But the tapping is what bends those bristles a little bit and gives you these wider ones. If every single one was like this, it would look kind of boring. So I slide a couple, tap a couple. Look at how I'm creating a little run this way. It's up to you how you want this to flow. Maybe it's not ready to go big quite yet, so I just start making them small again. What the heck? Play around with it. Figure out what looks good in your scene today, and you decide when to make them bigger. See that? I think here I'm just going to fill in this a little bit. You can actually just smash. You don't even need any more paint. We're just using the paint that's already here to fill in some of those gaps. If we wanted to have a big lake here, look at that. We've already got like the reflection figured out. Just the motion created both the tops and the reflection. But I don't think we're doing that today. I think I'm going to change this and just tap. Try to figure out the lay of the land here, and maybe it's a little flatter, so I just tap at the base here so I can create a little bit of flat land. This just helps me figure out where to put the highlights. Okay. A lot of this is going to get covered up anyway, so no big deal. Alright, so I think now is the time where we start loading a bit more color in the brush, and we start making some trees here. I'm going to use this tree that's already there, and I'm just going to tap and create a taller tree. And then maybe we're going to create a lot of trees here today. Look at that, just these little taps down, working from the center out. Don't you worry. This is just the dark parts. It's just the silhouette of the tree. Okay? all the branches get defined when we do the highlights. So try not to worry about it too much. Just go for the basic shape. Very light, holding my brush level, handle over and down, to the right and down because I'm a righty. And I use that corner, just touch a couple spots right up at the top. That's all they need to be, it's just there. Then I start tapping and going a little bit from the center to the right, center to the left, center to the right, center to the left. As I go down my tree, I go a little further out. But when you try to make 8,000 little tree branches, things can get away from you. So, kind of what happened right here. I played around with it a little too much. I've got to keep that brush moving down. So let's see if I can clean that up. Just make a couple of basic shapes. There it is. Sometimes here, if things don't work out, I just make the tree a little taller and I build it down so that it makes sense. Look at that, that's a tall, skinny tree. Unless I make these bottom ones a little wider. But you can see I'm already thinking about it too much. And then the tree starts, looking a little weird. So I'm just going to make a new tree. Tap down. You see that? When you go faster, it just looks better. This tree has that kind of a whirl, like a pregnant look to it. So maybe we'll hide it. If it's not doing what you want, cover it up. And we'll figure out what trees in front and what trees behind. This is just a big old mass of color. We don't really care. Can't forget about this. Best thing about this style of painting is when there's a little bit of an issue there that you don't like, we're just going to cover that up. Tap, 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 and just keep going. Doesn't need to have 600 bristles and 600 branches, I should say. See, when I try to draw a straight line, it doesn't turn straight. You just have to kind of do it and let your muscle memory take over, and it'll make the correct shape. Ooh, that's a big one. This is way in front. And sometimes if you just do one tree that you're really happy with, it's a successful painting. You may notice here I'm making my trees all different heights, They're all the exact same height and size and shape. Looks a little boring. Make them different, give it a little more natural feel. There we go. Lots and lots of trees today. Maybe there's a little detail here and there. Good, good, good. Okay, now, as I said here, I'm just trying to figure out the lay of the land, something like this. I'm going to be tapping some dark color on here, but I just sort of scratch a little bit, trying to figure out how this land is going to flow, something like that. Then, let's stop for a moment here. I like to clean my brush. I put the paper towel over it and I just pinch off that excess paint gently. You don't want to pull the head off the brush. Pinch off that excess color and it makes it a little easier on your paint thinner when you go to clean it. See what I mean? They're still a little bit worked up in there, so don't be afraid to let that work into the paint thinner and give it some good swirls and taps. Get that excess thinner out, excess paint out. There, that's a little better. And before we do highlighting, I like to take my knife, no paint on the knife, put it right up in the center and lift up. Just push that paint. Really helps these trees come alive. Just a little bit. You don't need to drag them all the way to the top of the canvas, you know, just, you can see a little spike up there. It looks good. Even a little bit on this one here. Use the short edge of the knife. And maybe a couple of spots here and there. I just push and move that paint up and down, creating some little sticks and twigs in between. Little details. Good, good, good. Now, to do our tree trunks, a little bit of the white. Ooh, don't need that much. Some dark sienna. Both colors kind of splayed out. Let's see how this works. We're kind of doing the shadow and the highlight at once here. Don't even need the dark brown. Bob often puts Van Dyke brown in there and then highlights it. But I'm just going to touch a couple of spots here and there. One thing I see people do is they just start at the top and just make it a straight line. I think it looks a little like the tree got split in half. So here and there, let some of those trunks remain hidden just by not doing them. Couple of little bits here and there. And then we'll cover some of them up. That one there's a bit of excess paint there. So, with my knife here, I got a little bit of that excess paint, and since this is all going to get covered up anyway, I can just cover up some of that excess trunk that got away from me there. We got just a little bit there. All right, so let's go ahead. What are we doing here? We're going to take a bit of our liquid white and start teasing down the cadmium yellow. Now in this particular painting here, these highlights are not so bright. So I might just use a little bit of that mountain mix. Look how dull of a green we get, not super bright. Don't really, excuse me, don't really want the highlights of the trees to overwhelm everything. So I'm going to just put a little bit of highlight here and there. See what happens. And I'm going to work with the ones I think are in the back first. Highlighting one side here. Notice how I just highlighted center and left. That way when I do the next tree in front, I'm not fighting a bunch of paint that's already there. I can overlap and create depth and distance in my painting. Same thing with this tree. Don't highlight on the right so much so it's easier to overlap the left tree, the left side of the next tree. And then the reverse on this one. Little bits of highlights here and there. Working my way down. There is some chunky paint on that tree. That's all right. When this dries, you're going to be able to feel all the texture. This tree I think is in back of, maybe it is in front. I'll tell you what, this tree is my least favorite, so I'm going to push that one in the back. It's going to have some highlights, sure, but not as many. That way, when I highlight the ones next to it, I just cover whatever I want. This tree started out in the back, but now it's going to be in front. There we go. Way to cover up your sins there. Now, I'm going to wipe some of that excess paint off, and I'm going to thin down some more color using that same white with just a lot more yellow in it. And a little bit of the sap green. See, it's a little bit brighter. Maybe even a speck of the phthalo blue will shock this up here a little bit. And to fit this stuff in, I'm just going to keep using the fan brush, and I'm just going to tap, getting some of this color out there, creating some indications of the grass. Not super bright. Working my way, figuring out where the lay of the land is. There's lots of paint up here on my brush, so I'm just barely touching. Barely touching. And that paint comes right off, no problem. Very similar color, just a little bit different angle, and you get the different effect. A little bit more paint on the brush and it comes off a little bolder. As I continue to tap, I'm running out of paint and it automatically gets darker and darker. That's where you can get these little hill effects, these little rolling things happening in your painting. Something like that. We got something started. You know, I think Bob even took a little bit of that highlight color here and he dropped in maybe a little bush. Right before the grass. Maybe there's a little one over here. Just something kind of living out there behind at the base of the tree, you know? So, coming back here and just create the grass, just tap right on over the base of the bush. There we go. Getting things started. Good enough. Good enough for now. So let's take a little bit more of that mountain mixture and Maybe. Oh, I even brought this big mamma jam out here, a brand new fan brush here. I'm going to take just a tiny bit of the liquid white and mix it with some titanium white, just a little bit back and forth here. Let's try to figure out where our water is coming from. Maybe it's a little bit, if it's a little too thick there, let me thin it down just a tad. I'm going to add just a tad of blue, a little bit of that liquid white, titanium white. That might be a little too blue, but we'll see. Oh, there we go. It was a little too blue. You know what? I'm not immune from having to try again. So if you don't get the right color, don't just try to work with it sometimes. Just stop what you're doing. Clean out your brush. Really dry that brush. And try again. There we go. That's a lot less blue now. That blue is very, very strong, so let my happy accident fuel your imagination here. And just going to drag a little bit here and there. Let's get a little water going. Try to figure out where this movement is happening. Not very much. Don't want to kill all that water effect that we got going on here. Maybe this is just going to kind of move and meander. Something like that. So, now that I have a little bit of that started, now I'm going to tap in where I think my land is going to come out. Tapping, trying to figure out an interesting little shape to our river or stream, whatever we're calling it. Creating some little peninsulas. I like to think of these kind of like fingers. Little finger kind of coming off here. So I get it down there, trying to keep the bottom of it relatively flat. It just helps me guide my way down, trying to think about the lay of the land here. And let's put out a little finger right there. A little more paint. And let's just call that good. I'm going to continue on, but we want to work one little bit at a time. Don't have to do it all at once. So let me clean up the base here just by moving my brush in a certain angle. You see, I just take some of that color and it just spreads out flat, changes it up a little bit, changes the color. Nothing wrong with that. Pull some of that out. Think about the way that the land is kind of moving around. Heck, we could even add splashes and crashes if the mood strikes us. Put a little bit of that color. Dirty up the water a little bit. You can also do this without dirtying the water. There's ways to do it, but I'm not really too worried about it. I just want there to be some interest happening here. Okay? Now that we got that, we get to decide how we want to create the rest of the grass. Do you want to keep going with your fan brush? Do you want to try to maybe do a little bit more at once? That you can do that. So let's go ahead and try to do more at once here. And to do that, I'm going to need a better, cleaner, newer 1-inch brush. When the 1-inch brush is newer, let me show you the difference here between the old one and the new one. You can see here how puffy the old one is, where the newer brush here, the bristles are all still nice and together and smooth. We're talking dozens and dozens of paintings, you know, before the brush gets worn down and such. But when you have a brand new brush, just make some of these highlights, at least for me, go a little easier. So, I'm going to start pulling down some of this cadmium yellow. Work it. Give it a good little zigger-zagger and these straight pulls. And you start to see, let's see if you can get up here. Look at that chiseled edge that's starting to form. Okay. Plenty of color. Work those bristles in there, maybe even a touch of the yellow ochre, what the heck. And then I push back. It's lots of color. Pushed up there, you start to see that nice little ridge line forming. You get that nice chiseled edge here. And now I can tap and get that different grass effect here. If it's not working for you, add another drop of the liquid white. I would recommend liquid white over paint thinner. If you do use paint thinner, you gotta use an incredibly small amount. Half a drop. And let that paint come off. Remember, we're sticking paint on top of paint. Find the angle and just the right amount of pressure to get that paint to come off your brush, and follow those same steps here, just moving, letting it get darker and darker as you move away. Then when you reload, you create a whole new ridge line just by tapping and getting that bright color again. Working away, letting it get darker and darker. Something like that. So, working this down here like this. Kind of use that fan brush as my guide, but I'm going to go over a little bit of what I did on this side here. It helps to have a nice, taut canvas. You can hear that. It just almost sounds like a little drum. But it's not floppy. Okay. I'm going to change up the color significantly now. I'm going to add in some more of the sap green, a little bit of the yellow ochre, and oh boy, I can just feel that paint getting thicker. So one single drop of the paint thinner, and I work it back and forth, allow it to mix a little bit and thin down the color. Then let's go ahead and just start to create a different, duller color as we move towards this section here. Very, very nice. Just take it one step at a time. Create the size and shape and angles of your hill here. If you give it a little bit more of a vertical feel, it'll look like we're up. I added just a touch of the cad yellow on that last bit. There we go. Got something going there now. But if we don't like it, we can change it. Okay, before I move on, I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup with my whites. That's liquid white and titanium white. If there's a touch of blue in there, it's not going to hurt a thing. Once again, dropping some of it in there, maybe a little splash now and again. Just a little touch, touching slightly up, creating a little bit of movement here. It's up to you. If you don't like it, just rub it out sideways. Just okay. Now I think we're going to have one more little peninsula. I do a little bit more than I need so I can kind of figure out where I want this to flow. And you can kind of see here the fingers coming from the left and the right. So I think the next one here, maybe right about here. So I come back with my massive, super old brush here, and let's just get vigorous. Maybe this one does have a little bit of a hill shape to it. Now, I put a little bit more white in here than I should have, but that's all right. I just come in here and really knock it into place here with the dark paint. Something like that. And then a little bit more color. And let's create another little hill on this side. Gonna come down a little bit more. Oh, I'll tell you what, it just did. I'm not sure I meant to do that, but I did it. That just needs to get in there quickly. The more you go over it, the more it'll pick up the liquid white underneath, and it won't be dark anymore. So we just need some basic dark shapes here. And maybe a little bit lower. There we go. All right, do a little bit of cleanup here. Let's get some water flowing this way and that way. There we go. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Just sort of zigzagging around here. And we do have a little bit of splash, a little bit of underground something or other. Oh, that last one, wrong angle. So that's I'll just zigzag it and fix it. All right, so come back to my highlight. Bit more paint in the brush here, a little bit more of the yellow. Maybe dull it down with some yellow ochre. Gonna pick up a little bit of that blue. Just a little bit. Plenty of color up in the brush. And let's do the back one here first here. Let's plenty of color. Once you start getting into large areas here, you could totally do this with the 2-inch brush, and it would take just, a lot less time. Or you could take your time with it and do the whole thing with the fan brush. It's up to you. Maybe there's another little thing here, so I just change the angle and create another little section here. If it's a little too bright, just keep tapping and it will automatically dull, I promise you. All this super dark shadow color here, it'll dull everything down. If you just let it mix together. Try not to. I try not to let these things mix. But if you need to, it's there for you and it'll work with you. Creating all sorts of little shapes and sections to this grass here. Letting it work. And I'm just going to try to let it keep getting duller and duller as I move down to the corner, just like we did at the top, leaving those things a little bit darker in the corners. If the corners down here are a little bit darker, helps draw the eye into the rest of the painting. There we go, a little bit of yellow ochre kind of finish this off here. Change it up a little bit. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is I want to take most of the paint out of my brush. And I'm going to come back here and maybe soften this down a little too bright here, a little too textured. Now that I look at it, just want to settle a little bit of it down. A little too bright. Then again, I'm going to show you that fun trick here to create some extra details in our painting. And I think I'll do this with the fan brush because we just have a little more control with it. I have that same color on my brush, that same highlight color, and I'm going to go into this white mixture. Look at that. It's just a lighter, much lighter green. And we pick out a spot here or there where you think that the sunlight's really hitting it. And you can create some extra highlights to the highlight. Here and there. You can definitely overdo it. Find those little spots here where it makes sense. Try not to overdo it. And I think there might be a couple of spots, maybe just to keep this separated a little bit. Put a little highlight there. Just where it makes sense. Maybe I overdo it, maybe not. Stop before that happens, if you can. I just love doing that. It feels good. All right, I better stop. So I'm going to do just a little bit of cleanup here with my knife. Maybe the small knife will do it. And a little bit of that white mixture here. Create a little bit more of a waterline and spots here. Does a little bit of cleanup around these little fingers. Ooh, there was a dark one. How'd that get in there? Sort of rub it out. Well, I think that just about does it here. I might put in a couple little extra details in this, but I'm going to pretty much call that good. I think maybe we need something in the front. I don't think Bob had anything there in the front, but you tell me, and maybe I'll create another video, and if you think I need something in the front, you send me a comment and we'll see what we can do. I haven't done a video where I added stuff to a previous painting, so it's up to you guys. I put it to you. So for now, I'm going to thin down my paint here. I brought out the bright red and didn't use it for anything but the signature. So, a little liner brush. I'm going to call this one done for now. And you tell me if I need to revisit this guy. Alright. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'd appreciate it if you sent me a like or a subscribe, but I leave that to you. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.